with a note of disdain in her voice. Anita describes the sheriff as a vile human being who was condemned by the entirety of her community for the horrific acts he committed during his time as a public servant. His barbarity, however, would eventually return tenfold. Following another night of forced intimacy, Sheriff Call stepped out of the car and into the darkness, a twisted satisfaction coursing through him. As the car drove off, a mysterious figure approached him from behind and drove a knife straight into the law enforcer's chest. Unable to react, Sheriff Call crumpled slowly onto the floor, crawling desperately before ultimately succumbing to his wounds about a mile from the scene of the crime. Unfortunately, despite his heinous deeds, the Moat County community still chose to build a statue to commemorate the dearly departed sheriff. After her story, the reporter questions Anita on her history with the Jansons. In response, she reveals that she had worked for them as a part-time cleaner, right about the time their mother left the family high and dry. During that difficult period, she helped raise the then 5-year-old Jack Jansen while his father, W.W. Jansen, was busy chasing skirts and running the local newspaper, the Moat County Tribute. Ward Jansen, the elder of the two sons, had traded in their humble town in search of a better life, eventually landing a gig with the Miami Times. During his tenure with the organization, he became renowned for his pieces on the civil rights movement and condemning the mistreatment of the poor and the unjustly accused. His writings eventually caught the attention of Charlotte Bless, who, impressed by his work, began sending the writer numerous letters. While his father made a name for himself in the journalistic world, Jack shone brightly as a talented swimmer, even earning himself offers from several colleges. Unfortunately, in a sudden turn of events, he was kicked out of school and forced to return home to help his father run their business. Back at the Jansen home, a half-bare Jack gazes intently at a ring pulled from a box of mementos. Without warning, Anita bursts into the room to clean up after the untidy young man. She banters with him, and even does some playful role-playing with Jack. She pretends to be him, he pretends to be her, and that involves Anita pretending to shake hands with her Netherlands while Jack comes in, apologizing to the pretend Jack for interrupting her hand-to-gland combat session so he could clean the bed. Later that day, Jack heads over to his father's establishment. He questions him about his brother's whereabouts. News around the block is that the award-winning journalist had returned to their humble town to interview Hilary Van Wetter, the person accused of murdering Sheriff Cal. WW, however, believes that his elder son's arrival will do nothing more than to rock an already sinking ship. Meanwhile, Charlotte swoons over a love letter written to her by an incarcerated lover. In fact, she is so utterly smitten by his words that, despite her friend's concerns and the hundreds of other letters she receives from the penitentiary, she is convinced that she has finally found the one. Elsewhere, a newly arrived ward introduces his companion, Yardley Aikman, to the painfully unremarkable landscape of his hometown. Moments later, Jack arrives, and the brothers wrap each other in a tight bear hug. Following a round of pleasantries and awkward exchanges brought about by Jack's mishandling of their guests' belongings, the group of men head to the Jansen home. Over a shared meal, the patriarch introduces Ward to his newest flame, Ellen, a marketing professional from New York. However, before she can finish recounting the story of how she met their father, Anita interrupts, informing WW of a call from a certain Miss Roberta. To their surprise, Ellen rejects the call, adamantly insisting that calls are not to be taken during their family dinners, leaving the room in a brief yet tension-filled, awkward silence. WW is the first to break the silence, questioning Yardley about his life in London as Anita swoops up their empty plates. He then sets his sights toward Ward, curious about what interest a paper such as the Miami Times would have with Hilary Van Wetter. Ward explains that even if Hilary were guilty, he had rights that the process completely disregarded. Now, he and Yardley have come all the way to Lately, Florida, to help exonerate the innocent. The next day, Charlotte arrives at the Jansen home in search of Ward. Jack, beer in hand, eagerly assists her, carrying her case files as he leads her to his brother's office. Upon entering their humble office, Charlotte informs the writers of her engagement with Hilary, revealing her lover to be none other than the man they had come to save. She points them toward the boxes in Jack's arms, indicating that everything they need to know about their correspondence is within those files. As Yardley goes through the files, Charlotte thanks Ward for helping Hilary with his seemingly unwinnable case. While they go about their business, Jack finds himself smitten with the bride-to-be, the thought of her smile lingering in his mind as he struggles to focus his thoughts. Later that day, he takes Charlotte to the prison housing Hilary, with the young woman growing eager to catch a glance of the concrete fortress. Outside its towering walls, the two reminisce about their past, with Jack revealing that he lost his scholarship after losing his temper and emptying the entire pool in one night. They called that vandalism. She asks if he loses his temper often before commenting that this place is full of boys like him who just lose their temper. Suddenly, Charlotte begins groaning like an animal in heat. She's getting so ruddish, so titillated just being this close to Hilary. Oh, she bets he's ruddish for her all the time, too. Her actions leave Jack absolutely flabbergasted, as he can only stare at the stunning blonde before him sucking the air and humming like a bird at the mere thought of her lover. She's a real wildcat, ain't she, Troy? Sorry, Jack. Luckily, a prison guard snaps him out of his stupor when he orders them to leave the premises. Charlotte slyly tells the guard that Jack's daddy's in there and they just want to send him these special things called good vibrations, but they're still sent away, much to Charlotte's dismay. Following their visit, the group heads over to the office of Hillary's lawyer, Mr. Pine. They're all eager to discuss how their client's story was never investigated by the police. Unfortunately, both parties get off on the wrong foot, as the elderly lawyer greets Yardley with a hint of prejudice, like he can't believe that someone like him is the writing partner of someone like Ward. At one point, Mr. Pine even snaps at Yardley, telling him that he's been in that world for 5 minutes. The two parties go back and forth between arranging a meeting with Hillary. Ultimately, Mr. Pine relents, but only after Ward threatens to bring in outside counsel to investigate the competency of the prisoner's defense. Days later, Charlotte, clad in her finest dress, meets with the team so they can venture off to prison. There, the lovers finally meet and soon engage in a deeply sensual and intimate encounter, completely ignoring the fact that they are seated right beside the paper boys. Unfortunately, the incident catches the attention of the guards, who quickly drag Hillary out as Charlotte screams in protest. The next day, Jack and Ward visit the Department of Public Information in search of an explanation for the missing evidence in Sheriff Call's murder. Unfortunately, they leave with more questions unanswered, their threats of involving the police deflating like a balloon. Back at the prison, the journalists once again attempt to question Hillary, but similar to their last visit, his sights are firmly set upon Charlotte. This time, however, he gazes at her with disdain, for seeing her dress decently deeply triggers something within him. As Ward attempts to intervene and question the prisoner, a fuming Hillary vehemently orders Charlotte to wear something more revealing during her next visit, before hurling slurs at Yardley while storming out. Following the horrible encounter, the journalists head back to the drawing board, while Jack slowly develops the green fever for both Hillary and Charlotte's relationship and Ward and Yardley's brotherly bond. As the days pass, his infatuation with Charlotte only grows, the thought of her filling his mind from dusk till dawn. On a lovely day on the beach, Charlotte senses Jack's desires and urges him to abandon such fantasies lest they risk ruining their friendship. Frustrated by her seeming rejection, Jack heads out for a swim in the crystal-clear waters, hoping the cool waves will wash away his disappointment. While swimming, Jack is stung by a jellyfish several times and struggles to make his way back to shore. Two beachgoers rush to his aid, one of them suggesting that they drench him with urine to nullify the toxins within his body. Overhearing their conversation, Charlotte rabidly fights off the woman because, quote, "If anyone's gonna do a G-shower on him, it's gonna be me." Irate, the woman cusses her out, but Charlotte merely reasons that he doesn't like strangers peeing on him. Don't we all? The next day, Jack fully recovers from his encounter and learns that Charlotte's heroics had made front-page news. Yardley's taunts just humiliate him further, spurring him to attack the journalist. In the heat of the moment, he yells out a slur within earshot of Anita. Following the encounter, an enraged Yardley takes his anger out on Charlotte before demanding that Jack be taken off the case. To ease the tensions between both parties, Ward decides to head to the prison with his brother, while Yardley settles matters with Charlotte. At the jail, a guilty and remorseful Jack mulls over his actions, while Ward once again questions Hillary. During their meeting, the prisoner firmly reiterates his alibi, insisting that he could not be guilty as he was engaged in lawn work at a golf course at the time of the sheriff's murder. The bloody knife and clothes that they found within his home were a result of his occupation of gutting and skinning alligators for a living. Following their conversation, Ward sends Yardley and Charlotte to visit the so-called golf course, while he and Jack make their way to Hillary's uncle, Tyree. After driving deep into a swamp and fighting through thickets of overgrown fauna, the men finally arrive at Tyree's residence, a rundown shack with several alligator corpses hanging out like jerky. Ward begins his investigation, his questions drawing Tyree's ire as he carves through the gator. The sight of its entrails nearly has Jack losing his stomach. As for Tyree, he doesn't seem too moved by the thought of his nephew getting the chair. But despite his apprehension, the man cooperates, confirming that Hillary was indeed on a job with him at a golf club by Ormond Beach. Caught off guard by his subject's sudden compliance, Ward can't help but wonder if the man is feigning cooperation to cover up a plot more sinister than any of them could ever imagine. Unfortunately, before he can dig deeper, Tyree orders his son Eugene to send the journalists on their way. As they head back to their vehicle, Jack recalls that he had seen Tyree heading out of the prison, leading Ward to believe that the uncle and nephew were somehow in cahoots. Maybe they were getting their stories together. Later that day, the group reconvenes at the office to discuss their findings. During their investigation, Yardley and Charlotte discovered that during the day of the murder, the aforementioned golf course by Ormond Beach had been stripped of several greens. These missing patches were then bought by a developer who could confidently identify Tyree and Hillary. However, much to Ward's frustration, Yardley refuses to reveal the identity of his source as he's honoring a promise of confidentiality. Following the revelation, Jack notices Charlotte and Yardley's playful demeanor, which has him wondering if they slept together. Unwilling to lie to her friend, Charlotte admits that they did. She downplays it, saying that you need to get people like Yardley on your side, leaving Jack incredulous. As the rain begins to fall, she invites Jack to dance with her on the lawn, an offer he happily accepts. Together, they dance with abandon, the cold drizzle momentarily washing away the sadness that weighs on Jack's wounded heart. With their findings, the two journalists finally have enough evidence to craft a story covering the injustice in their legal system. However, Ward is unconvinced by his partner's story and decides to stay in the dreary town to further investigate the golf course, despite his boss's orders. His decision infuriates WW, who believes that publishing such an article would hurt the image and revenue of his newspaper. To make matters worse, Ellen chimes in and says they're getting married. She shows off her ring to Jack, which she says is antique. With a solemn look, Jack says he knows. It belonged to his mother. Ellen's face falls as he takes the ring off her finger, and despite his father quietly commanding him to give it back, Jack says that it belonged to his mother. It's all he has. During a night out at a bar, Ward attempts to uncover the identity of the builder from Charlotte. Despite her trepidations, he continues to press her, resulting in a brief altercation between the two brothers. Eventually, Ward leaves, and a deeply infatuated Jack decides to gift Charlotte his mother's ring. She accepts the gift, but she makes it clear that she's still in love with Hillary, and she vows to return the ring should he want it back. As her words and image haunt his dreams, Jack is suddenly awoken by a distressed Charlotte, who has noticed something awry in his brother's room. They rush to the room and find themselves before a scene that will haunt their memories forever. Ward bare, bloody, beaten, and tied up like an animal. Enraged, Jack leaps through the window, smashing into one of the assailants like a freight train before tending to his brother. Thanks to Jack's quick actions, they manage to rush Ward to the hospital, where his condition eventually stabilizes. Following the horrific encounter, Charlotte's attempts to comfort Jack ultimately result in a night of unbridled passion between the two, every steamy touch breathing life into the young man's dreams. Unfortunately, the encounter does more harm than good as it stirs up Jack's emotions, leading him to question Charlotte's commitment to her fiancé. Just as it did before, his advances are once again rejected, with the older woman warning that she, like Ward, has a dark side that Jack cannot handle. And she isn't talking about Ward batting for the other team, a piece of information that shocks Jack, but in the end, he isn't hurt by Ward's preference, or by the fact that he's got some kind of dark side. Jack loves Ward. These brothers live for each other. He's just sad Ward never told him. By the day's end, Charlotte informs Jack of her intention to leave, handing him the ring that he had gifted her just days before. Devastated, Jack begs her to stay, making Charlotte sigh. He's screwing with her head. She incredulously points out that he has his whole life ahead of him, but he wants her. With a disapproving shake of her head, she closes the door on him. The next day, Jack heads to Miami Times and insists that Yardley let Ward read the article before he publishes it. When Yardley dismisses his request, Jack snaps that he needs to get the facts straight, leading Yardley to comment on how much he's starting to sound like his brother. In any case, they have a deadline, and they don't have the time to get all the facts. Lately set Hillary up, that's the story. When Jack yells, "That's not the truth," Yardley suddenly drops the English accent, revealing that he's American all along, and that unless you're a colored James Bond, guys like him ain't getting a job up in his spot. And to top it all off, he got drunk once and let Ward play his flute. Ward's got a taste for ebony, and now he hates himself. That's the truth. With Jack stunned into silence, Yardley tells him to go back to his brother for he has a deadline to meet. Months later, Jack learns that the article had been published, and that Hillary had been granted a pardon by the governor himself. Meanwhile, his love for Charlotte continues to burn brighter than the sun, as he sends her numerous love letters, one even containing the beloved ring of his mother. Unfortunately, before she can finish reading his messages, Hillary storms into her apartment, shocking her. She initially tells him to leave, but with Hillary taking her like a rutting animal, she melts into the encounter, oscillating between bliss and fear. He's rough, almost to the point of aggression, and by the end of it, Charlotte looks a mess. Hillary gruffly orders Charlotte to pack her bags and come live with him in the swamp. Though she isn't keen to be living in such a place, Hillary has her fearing for her safety, so she agrees, accompanying the madman into the murky, waterlogged wilderness. After some time, both Charlotte and Ward live in absolute misery. When Jack visits his brother, he's a smelly mess that he can smell from across the room. A drunken Ward slurs out that Yardley left the firm after using their falsified story to snag himself a massive book deal. Not liking seeing his brother so defeated, Jack encourages him to get up and shower. As he slowly gathers his bearings, a slurring Ward emphasizes that there was no developer, no proof that Hillary and Tyree ever stole anything on the day of the murder. During his haze, the downtrodden Ward resolves to set the record straight and write his story, despite everyone wanting him to keep quiet. A few days later, at WW and Ellen's wedding, Jack reunites with Anita, who had been let go a few months prior. Following a brief conversation and a shared drink, she hands him a letter from Charlotte, admitting that her decision to accompany Hillary was a mistake. Moreover, she wants to join him at the wedding. Moved by Charlotte's plight, Jack storms out of the wedding to save her. Just as he's about to leave, Ward steps in, trying to reason with the infatuated young man, urging him to reserve his chivalry for another day. Despite his reservations, Ward ultimately gives in, guiding Jack on a boat ride through the shadowy swamp. The pair made their way through, narrowly avoiding some traps as they inch ever closer to the Van Wetter household. Upon arriving, Jack calls out to his first love, but is met with silence. Unbeknownst to him, Hillary had choked the life out of Charlotte in his desperate attempt to prevent her from attending the wedding. So instead of Charlotte's sweet voice, Jack receives nothing but threats and taunts from a deranged Hillary. Without warning, he charges towards the brothers with a machete. After a fleeting tussle, Hillary gains the upper hand over Ward. Jack watches helplessly as the murderer slices his brother's throat, splashing red across the grimy terrain. As Ward's flame fades to embers, Jack escapes into the overgrown thicket with Hillary in hot pursuit. A hair's breadth from capture, Jack leaps into the alligator-infested waters, momentarily eluding his pursuer. Hillary, however, is unrelenting as he scours the waters for the boy. Thanks to his training as a swimmer, Jack skillfully evades the flashlight's glare, swimming to safety as the madman struggles to keep his vessel running. With the morning sun hanging high above him, an exhausted Hillary returns to his cabin. Upon entering, he quickly notices something amiss, for Charlotte's body, once cold and rigid, seems to have disappeared during the night. Unbeknownst to him, Jack had returned to the cabin and retrieved both bodies, presenting them as evidence of the lunatic's guilt. In the trial that followed, Hillary is arrested and charged with the murders of Ward and Charlotte, and ultimately meets his demise at the seat of the electric chair. During Ward's funeral, Jack is finally reunited with his long-lost mother. In the years that followed, Jack, like his brother, wielded the pen as his sword, gaining renown as a masterful storyteller. He lives the rest of his days haunted by memories of his first love, his heart forever yearning for what might have been. As for Sheriff Call's murderer, the answer to that mystery died with him.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.